The bass thrummed through the polished marble floors of Apex, Manhattan's most exclusive rooftop lounge, where the cocktails cost more than most people's weekly grocery bills, and the clientele wore their wealth like a second skin. Maya Chen had been tending bar for 3 hours, her black button-down pristine despite the crush of Friday night crowds, her dark hair pulled into a sleek ponytail that suggested efficiency over style. She moved behind the mahogany bar with practiced grace, mixing drinks with the kind of precision that came from necessity rather than passion. This job paid triple what she'd made at the dive bar in Brooklyn, and triple meant keeping the lights on in her grandmother's apartment while finishing her master's thesis in art history, a degree that everyone kept telling her was beautifully useless. Whiskey, neat. Top shelf, a voice called out, smooth and expectant in the way of men who'd never been told no. Maya glanced up to find a man in his early 30s leaning against her bar, a custom suit fitting him like it had been constructed directly onto his body. Dark hair swept back, sharp jawline, eyes that tracked her movements with unsettling focus. Behind him, 3 other men formed a loose semicircle, not bodyguards exactly, but something close. She reached for the Macallan without comment, poured 2 fingers into a crystal tumbler, and slid it across the bar. $60. He pulled out a black card, eyes never leaving her face. You're new. 3 weeks. She ran the card, her tone professionally neutral. You don't smile much. It wasn't quite a criticism, more an observation delivered with faint amusement. I smile when something's funny. Maya handed back his card and receipt. One of his companions, a stocky man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, chuckled. She's got teeth, Dante. The man, Dante, tilted his head slightly, studying her the way art collectors studied paintings before deciding whether to acquire them. Tell me something. A woman with your intelligence. What are you doing pouring drinks for Wall Street parasites? Maya's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She'd heard variations of this conversation 100 times. Rich men who thought bartenders existed as entertainment, as puzzles to solve between business calls and stock portfolios. Paying bills, she replied simply. Will there be anything else? If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. I'm hiring, Dante said, leaning forward slightly. The movement brought the scent of expensive cologne and something darker gun oil, maybe, or the particular tension that clung to dangerous men. Personal assistant, 6 figures, benefits. All you'd have to do is look beautiful and keep my schedule organized. The offer hung in the air between them, insult wrapped in luxury paper. Maya set down the bottle she'd been holding with deliberate care. When she met his eyes, her voice was crystal clear and cold as January rain. Let me be very direct, so there's no confusion. I'm not interested in being decorative, being saved, or being anything other than your bartender for the next 4 hours of my shift. If you want another drink, I'm happy to pour it. If you want to proposition me again, you can take your black card and your 6-figure condescension somewhere else. The semicircle of men behind Dante went very still. The ambient noise of the bar seemed to recede laughter from a bachelorette party, the clink of glasses, the distant throb of music, all of it fading into a held breath. Dante's expression didn't change exactly, but something shifted behind his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. His fingers drummed once against the bar top, a single controlled movement. I apologize, he said finally, voice losing its playful edge and gaining something harder. That was poorly phrased and disrespectful. Maya waited, not accepting or rejecting the apology, just watching. Let me try again. He straightened, and the casual arrogance evaporated into something more genuine. I run several businesses in the city. I was trying badly to compliment your composure under pressure. The offer was real, though I clearly made it sound like something else entirely. The answer is still no, Maya said. But thank you for the apology. She turned to help another customer, effectively dismissing him. Behind her, she heard the scarred man mutter something in Italian that sounded like a warning. Dante replied in the same language, voice too low to catch the words. When she glanced back, they were retreating to a private booth in the corner, the VIP section where men like him conducted business that didn't appear on tax returns. 20 minutes later, Maya was mixing a complicated cocktail involving egg whites and activated charcoal when her manager, Stephen, appeared at her elbow. His expression carried the particular strain of someone delivering news they didn't want to. Maya, you need to be more careful. She didn't look up from shaking the cocktail shaker. Careful how? That man you just turned down? Dante Ravenna? Stephen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He owns this place. Owns half the restaurants in Manhattan. His family, he cut himself off, glancing around nervously. Just be polite, okay? Smile more. Don't antagonize the VIP clients. The cocktail shaker froze mid-shake. Dante Ravenna. The name clicked into place with the force of a puzzle piece she should have recognized earlier. She'd heard it whispered in the kitchen, seen it on liquor invoices, noticed the way security nodded deferentially when certain black cars pulled up to the entrance. The Ravenna family wasn't just wealthy. They were power brokers who operated in the spaces between legal and illegal, their empire built on construction contracts and waste management, and a dozen other industries that functioned as veins carrying money through the city's body. I didn't know, Maya said quietly. Now you do. Stephen's hand landed briefly on her shoulder, sympathetic, worried. Look, he didn't complain or anything, but maybe next time, just softer rejection, okay? He moved away to handle a situation with bottle service, leaving Maya to finish the cocktail with hands that wanted to tremble but refused. She delivered the drink to a woman in designer everything, accepted the generous tip with a smile that felt like plastic, and tried to ignore the weight of attention she could feel from the VIP booth. Dante Ravenna hadn't looked at her once since returning to his table. He was deep in conversation with his associates, phone out, occasionally nodding at something one of them said. The picture of a businessman managing an empire, but she felt watched anyway. Marked. At 11:30, a cocktail waitress approached the bar with an unusual request. The gentleman in booth 7 wants to send a bottle of Dom Perignon to table 12. Says it's for the birthday girl. Maya glanced at table 12, a group of young women celebrating, their laughter bright and unguarded. Then at booth 7, where Dante sat with a phone to his ear, not looking in her direction. She prepped the champagne bucket, arranged the glasses on the tray with practiced efficiency, and watched as the waitress delivered it. The birthday girl's face lit up with delighted surprise. Her friends squealed and immediately started taking photos. It was kind, unexpectedly, casually kind. Maya frowned, not trusting it. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of orders and cleanup, her mind circling the interaction like a dog worrying at a bone. By the time she hung up her apron at 2 a.m., exhaustion sat heavy in her shoulders and behind her eyes. The staff exit spilled into an alley that smelled like restaurant grease and expensive garbage. Maya pulled her jacket tighter against the October chill and started the 6-block walk to the subway station. She made it 2 blocks before the black Mercedes pulled alongside her, moving at walking pace. The back window rolled down smoothly, revealing Dante Ravenna's angular features cast in shadow and streetlight. "Get in," he said. Not quite a command, not quite a request. "I'm fine walking." Maya kept moving, pulse kicking up despite her casual tone. "It's 2 a.m. in Manhattan. You're clearly exhausted. And I owe you an apology that requires more than 30 seconds at a bar." The car continued its patient crawl beside her. 5 minutes of conversation. Then my driver takes you home, or to the subway, or wherever you want. Maya stopped walking. Every instinct she'd honed over 27 years screamed at her not to get in the car with a man she'd insulted, who owned half the city, whose family name appeared in newspaper articles with words like alleged and under investigation. But exhaustion made people stupid, and curiosity, her most dangerous quality, made them stupider. She opened the door and slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her entire education. Dante sat at the far end of the bench seat, maintaining careful distance. Up close, in the intimate space of the car, she could see details she'd missed at the bar. The faint scar along his jawline, the calluses on his knuckles that didn't match the manicured nails, the way his eyes tracked her with an intensity that suggested he was used to reading people the way she read Renaissance paintings, searching for the truth beneath the surface composition. "I wasn't offering you a job as decoration," he said without preamble. "Though I absolutely understand why you heard it that way. What were you offering then?" Maya kept her back straight, hand on the door handle. "An actual position. I have 3 businesses that are legitimately run and require someone with intelligence, discretion, and the ability to organize chaos. You managed a Friday night bar rush without breaking a sweat. You shut me down without flinching. Those are skills I need. You don't know anything about me. I know you're working on a master's thesis in art history, while supporting someone, probably family, based on the way you checked your phone during slow moments like you were worried. I know you're too proud to accept help but practical enough to work a job you're overqualified for. I know you see through bullshit faster than most people I employ. He tilted his head. Should I continue? Maya's throat tightened. You had me investigated. I had my head of security Google your name after you walked away. It took 30 seconds. A ghost of a smile. You have a thesis blog. It's very thorough. She should have been angry. She was angry. But underneath the anger was something more complicated. A reluctant fascination with a man who apologized with actions instead of just words, who bought champagne for strangers, who looked at her like she was a problem he genuinely wanted to solve rather than a conquest. Why do you care? The question came out softer than she intended. Dante was quiet for a moment, gaze drifting to the window, where the city slid past in neon and shadow. My grandmother was a lot like you, he said finally. Educated, stubborn, brilliant. She worked as a seamstress in the Bronx because no gallery would take her seriously as an artist. By the time someone recognized her talent, she'd lost the fire to create. He looked back at Maya. I learned early that the world wastes remarkable people by making them choose between their passions and survival. I'm in a position to change that equation occasionally. So I do. The car slowed to a stop at a red light. In the silence, Maya could hear her own breathing, the soft hum of expensive machinery, the distant wail of a siren. This is the part where you tell me there's a catch, she said. The catch is that working for me means entering a world with complications. The Ravenna name carries weight, some of it good, much of it historically problematic. You'd be associated with that. His expression remained neutral, offering her the ugly truth without dressing it up. People would make assumptions. Some of those assumptions would be wrong. Some wouldn't be. Are you? Maya chose her words carefully. Are your businesses legal? The ones I'd have you working with? Yes. Restaurants, art galleries, real estate development. All above board, all profitable, all desperately in need of someone who understands beauty and business. He paused. My family has a complicated past. I'm trying to build a different future. That requires people who can't be bought, who won't look away from problems, who have their own moral compass. You struck me as that kind of person. The light turned green. The car glided forward. Where are we going? Maya asked, suddenly aware they'd been driving for several minutes. Wherever you tell my driver to go. Dante pulled out a business card, heavy stock, minimalist design, a phone number handwritten on the back. Think about it. Call me if you're interested. Or don't. But either way, you don't have to worry about your job at Apex. Stephen was told you have complete creative freedom behind that bar, and anyone who bothers you answers to me. He handed her the card. Their fingers brushed for a fraction of a second, and she felt the warmth of his hand against hers. Columbia and 110th, she told the driver, making her decision. The car changed direction smoothly. They rode in silence for the remaining blocks, Maya studying the card while Dante studied his phone, giving her space to think. When they pulled up outside her grandmother's building, a pre-war walk-up that had seen better decades, Dante finally looked at her again. Thank you for not calling the police when a strange man followed you in a car, he said, and there was genuine humor in his voice. Despite everything, Maya laughed. Thank you for not being as terrible as I assumed you were. The night is young. I still have time to disappoint you. He reached past her to open the door, careful not to touch her. Be safe, Maya Chen. And think about what you want beyond survival. You might surprise yourself. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, clutching the card, watching as the Mercedes pulled away and disappeared into the city's endless circulation of light and money and power. Inside her grandmother's apartment, Maya found Nai asleep in her chair, an oxygen machine humming its steady rhythm, television playing old cantopop videos on low volume. She covered her with a blanket, kissed her forehead, and stood at the window looking out at a city that suddenly felt different, like a painting where someone had revealed a hidden layer beneath the visible surface. The card sat on her nightstand as she changed for bed, its presence both promise and warning. She didn't sleep well. In her dreams, she stood in a gallery, full of paintings she'd created, and every single one showed a man in a perfect suit standing at the edge of the frame, watching. Maya didn't call the number on the card. For 3 days, she carried it in her wallet like a lottery ticket she was afraid to scratch, pulling it out during subway rides and coffee breaks to study the handwritten digits, as if they might rearrange themselves into something less complicated. Work at Apex continued with an unsettling new dynamic. Stephen no longer hovered over her shoulder with anxious corrections. The regulars who used to lean too far over the bar and let their hands wander suddenly developed impeccable manners. Even the kitchen staff treated her differently, not quite deference, but a careful respect that made her skin itch. Word had spread. She was untouchable now, marked by Dante Ravenna's attention. On Thursday night, a man in a tailored navy suit sat at her bar nursing a gin and tonic for 2 hours. His eyes never quite landing on her but never quite leaving either. Maya recognized the pattern: corporate security doing a lazy surveillance job, probably making sure she wasn't selling stories to tabloids or planning some elaborate blackmail scheme. She served him with professional courtesy and silently resented every minute of it. Friday brought a different kind of problem. "Maya, someone left this for you," Stephen said during her break, handing her a cream-colored envelope with her name written in elegant calligraphy across the front. Inside, an invitation printed on cardstock that probably cost more per square inch than her rent. "The Ravenna Foundation cordially invites you to the annual Arts Patronage Gala, Saturday, October 14th. The Metropolitan Club, black tie optional." A handwritten note was paper-clipped to the invitation. No obligation, no expectations. Just an opportunity to see what supporting the arts actually looks like when you have the resources to do it properly. Car will be available if you want it. Maya stared at the invitation long enough for her coffee to go cold. "Holy shit," breathed Cassandra, another bartender, peering over her shoulder. "The Ravenna Gala? People donate their kidneys for tickets to that thing. You have to go." "I don't have to do anything," Maya said, but her fingers traced the embossed lettering like she was reading Braille. "Girl, do you know how many artists get grants from that foundation? How many galleries get funding? This is your world." Cassandra squeezed her shoulder. "At least check it out. What's the worst that could happen?" Maya could think of several worst-case scenarios, all of them involving getting deeper into the orbit of a man whose pull she could already feel, rearranging the gravity of her carefully controlled life. But the invitation sat on her kitchen table that night while she helped Nai with dinner, its presence impossible to ignore. "You look troubled, little bird," her grandmother said in Cantonese, her voice thin but sharp with the perception that age sometimes granted. "A man? A complication," Maya corrected, ladling soup into bowls. "Complications are just opportunities to wear masks." Nai accepted her bowl with trembling hands that had once sewn wedding dresses for wealthy families, before arthritis stole her art. "When I was young, a man offered me a job in his factory. Everyone said he was dangerous, that his family had connections to bad elements. But I took the job anyway, and he paid me fairly for 20 years. Sometimes dangerous men are just men trying to be less dangerous." Maya thought about Caloose knuckles and champagne for strangers, about apologies delivered in the back of expensive cars. "Did you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Every Monday morning," Nai said with a wheezing laugh. "But I fed my children. That's what mattered." That night, Maya pulled out her thesis notes and tried to focus on Renaissance patronage systems, the complicated relationships between artists and the powerful families who funded them. How creativity and commerce had always been entangled in ways that made idealists uncomfortable. At midnight, she picked up her phone and typed a message to the number on the card. "I'll attend the gala, but I'm paying for my own dress and transportation. This is observation, not acceptance." The response came 30 seconds later. "Understood. Though I should warn you, observation has a way of becoming participation when you least expect it. Car will be outside your building at 7 p.m. Saturday regardless. Use it or don't." Maya set down her phone and tried to ignore the flutter in her chest that felt dangerously close to anticipation. Saturday evening found Maya standing in front of her closet in mounting panic, surrounded by rejected options that looked increasingly inadequate for an event at the Metropolitan Club. She'd finally settled on a vintage black gown she'd found at a consignment shop in Brooklyn, simple, elegant, a ghost of old money sophistication that didn't try too hard. Pearl earrings that had been her mother's, hair swept up in a way that suggested she hadn't spent 2 hours on YouTube learning the technique. At 6:55 p.m., she looked out her window and saw the black Mercedes idling at the curb, exactly where Dante had promised it would be. At 7:02 p.m., she made her decision. The driver, an older man with kind eyes and a perfectly neutral expression, opened the door without comment on her 7-minute rebellion. "Miss Chen," he said, as if chauffeuring reluctant women to galas was his primary occupation. "I'm Victor, Mr. Ravenna asked me to assure you that I'm under strict instructions to take you anywhere you'd like to go this evening, including back home if you change your mind." "Has anyone ever changed their mind?" Maya asked, settling into the leather seats. 3 times in 15 years, Victor said with the ghost of a smile. Mr. Ravenna sent flowers the next day with apologies for the stage's inconvenience. The drive to the Metropolitan Club took 40 minutes through traffic that parted around them with the ease of influence and strategic route planning. Maya watched the city transform block by block, her neighborhood's comfortable shabbiness giving way to the polished wealth of the Upper East Side, where even the trees looked expensive. The club itself was a Gilded Age masterpiece, all marble columns and soaring ceilings, the kind of space designed to make ordinary people feel small and important people feel validated. A receiving line of elegant patrons moved slowly toward the entrance, women in gowns that cost more than cars, men in tuxedos that whispered rather than shouted their quality. Maya felt her courage waver. Then she saw Dante. He stood near the entrance in a classic black tuxedo, talking to an elderly woman dripping in emeralds, his attention completely focused on whatever she was saying. As Maya approached, he glanced up, and something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps, or satisfaction, that she'd actually come. He excused himself smoothly and met her at the bottom of the steps. "You came," he said simply. "I observe," Maya corrected. "That's all this is. Then observe." He offered his arm, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. "I promise the art is worth the awkwardness of the company." They entered together, and Maya felt the weight of curious stares, whispered speculation, the social calculations happening in real time as Manhattan's elite tried to determine who she was and why Dante Ravenna had her on his arm. But then they passed through the main gallery, and everything else fell away. The walls were lined with contemporary works from emerging artists, bold, experimental pieces that challenged and seduced in equal measure. Young artists circulated through the crowd, their nervous energy palpable as potential patrons examined their work. "We fund 25 artists each year," Dante explained, his voice low and close to her ear as they walked. "Full stipends, studio space, materials, connections to galleries. No strings attached except that they have to create." Maya stopped in front of a massive canvas, abstract figures emerging from darkness into color. The technique sophisticated enough to suggest formal training fighting against raw emotion. "This is remarkable," she breathed. "The artist is a former foster kid from the Bronx, 23 years old, working as a house painter until we found her." Dante nodded toward a young woman in an elegant but clearly borrowed dress, talking animatedly to a gallery owner. "That's Jasmine. 3 galleries are bidding for her first show. She'll be fine now, regardless of what we do." Something in Maya's chest cracked open, not quite trust, but recognition. This wasn't performance. The foundation was real, the art was real, the transformations were real. "You actually meant it," she said quietly. "About changing the equation." "I told you I don't." Dante's hand pressed briefly against the small of her back, guiding her toward another section of the gallery. "Though I admit my methods are sometimes questionable." They spent the next hour moving through the exhibition, Dante introducing her to artists and patrons, his presence at her side both shield and spotlight. Maya found herself relaxing into conversations about technique and vision, her academic knowledge finally useful in a context that mattered. She was deep in discussion with a sculptor about negative space when she felt Dante tense beside her. "Excuse me a moment," he said, voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Maya turned to see what had changed his demeanor, and found a man approaching late 50s, silver hair, expensive suit, that somehow looked cheaper than Dante's despite probably costing twice as much. "Dante," the man said, voice carrying false warmth. "What a lovely event, though I'm surprised to see you embracing the arts so publicly. Your father always preferred more traditional investments." "My father preferred a lot of things I don't," Dante replied, voice pleasant and utterly cold. "Marcus, I don't believe you were on the guest list. I'm a +1. You know how these things work." Marcus's eyes slid to Maya with calculating interest. "And who is this charming creature? I don't recognize her from the usual circuit." Maya felt Dante's hand return to her back, a subtle claim. "This is Maya Chen, art historian and consultant." "Maya, this is Marcus Vitelli. He runs a competing enterprise." The pause before enterprise told Maya everything she needed to know. This wasn't just business rivalry. This was something older, darker, more personal. "Consultant," Marcus repeated, smile sharpening. "How modern. Tell me, Miss Chen, do you know what you're consulting on? The full scope of the Ravenna family business model?" "I know enough," Maya said, meeting his gaze steadily despite the warning bells ringing in her mind. I know this foundation has done more for emerging artists in 5 years than most institutions do in decades. That seems like a good place to start. Marcus's laugh was ugly. Idealism. How refreshing. He leaned closer, voice dropping. Be careful, my dear. Men like Dante have a habit of collecting beautiful things and then forgetting where they put them when the novelty wears off. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mr. Vitelli, Dante said, and there was something in his voice that made nearby conversations pause. I believe you've had too much champagne. Victor will be happy to call you a car. It wasn't a suggestion. 2 men in dark suits materialized from the crowd, not security exactly, but close enough. Marcus's smile remained fixed as he raised his hands in mock surrender. No need for dramatics. I was just leaving. He nodded to Maya. Lovely to meet you, Miss Chen. I hope you enjoy your observation. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving tension in his wake, like smoke. I apologize, Dante said after a moment, his jaw tight. That was inappropriate, and I should have prevented it. Who is he really? Maya asked. Someone my family has had complications with for a very long time. Dante's hand moved to her elbow, gently steering her toward a quieter corner of the gallery. Someone who would very much like to see me fail at separating the legitimate businesses from the legacy ones. Because if you succeed, you prove there's another way, Maya said slowly, understanding dawning. You become competition for his model. Dante looked at her with something like surprise. Yes. Exactly that. Before Maya could respond, a scream cut through the elegant murmur of conversation. They turned to see Jasmine, the young artist from the Bronx, stumbling backward from her canvas, hands shaking, eyes fixed on something that had been placed on the floor beneath her work. A dead rat, throat cut, blood pooling on the polished floor, and pinned to its body, a note in block letters, "This is what happens to Ravenna pets." The gallery erupted into controlled chaos gasps, horrified whispers, people backing away from the gruesome display while trying to maintain their sophisticated composure. Dante moved immediately, positioning himself between Maya and the scene, his body language shifting from cultured patron to something harder, more dangerous. Get her out of here. He told one of his associates, the scarred man from the bar, Maya realized. Take her home. Full security detail. I'm not leaving, Maya said, but her voice came out thinner than she wanted. Yes, you are. Dante turned to her, and for the first time, she saw past the charm and the careful control to the man underneath, someone who had learned young how to calculate threats and eliminate them efficiently. This was a message meant for me. I won't have you caught in the response. Mr. Ravenna. A woman in an elegant gown approached, older, composed, but with steel behind her eyes. The police are on their way. And your grandfather called. He wants you at the estate. Tonight. Dante's jaw clenched. Tell him I'll call him in an hour. He said tonight, Dante. The woman's voice carried the weight of someone who'd been giving him orders since childhood. This isn't a request. Maya watched the conflict play across his features, duty versus desire, family obligation versus whatever this was becoming between them. Go, she said quietly, making the decision for him. I'll be fine. Victor can take me home. I'm not your responsibility. Maya interrupted, even as she said it, knowing it was already too late. That he'd made her his responsibility the moment he'd apologized in the back of that car. That they'd both crossed a line neither of them had intended to approach. Handle your family. I'll handle mine. For a moment, he looked like he might argue. Then he nodded once, sharp and controlled. Victor stays with you until you're inside. Your building. Rico, he gestured to the scarred man, follows the car. Someone is watching her grandmother's apartment tonight. Rotating shifts. And I want to know who got past security with that thing in the next 2 hours. The orders were delivered rapid fire, no room for argument. The careful facade of the art patron stripped away to reveal the organizational structure underneath. Dante, Maya said, and he turned back to her. Is this what it's always like? For people in your world? He studied her face for a long moment, and she saw him calculating whether to lie, to soften it, to give her a palatable version of the truth. Sometimes it's worse, he said finally. Which is why I'll understand if you decide observation is enough, and you never want to see me again. He left before she could respond, surrounded immediately by his people, moving toward a crisis that she only partially understood. Maya let Victor guide her to the car, her mind racing, The image of that dead rat and its brutal message seared into her vision. This wasn't romance. This wasn't even really about her. She was a pawn in a game she barely comprehended, moved by players who'd been at war long before she'd poured that first whiskey. The smart thing, the only sane thing, was to go home, delete Dante's number, and return to her quiet life of thesis work and bar shifts, and taking care of Nai. But as the Mercedes pulled away from the Metropolitan Club, Maya found herself thinking about Jasmine's terrified face, about the other artists inside who'd had their celebration poisoned by violence meant for someone else, about Dante's eyes when he'd looked at her and chosen honesty over comfort, about the calluses on his hands that suggested he'd built his world through more than just inheritance and charm. "Miss Chen," Victor said from the front seat, his voice gentle. "If I may offer some advice?" "Please," Maya said, grateful for a voice that wasn't her own spiraling thoughts. "I've worked for the Ravenna family for 20 years. I've seen Mr. Dante grow from an angry teenager who wanted nothing to do with the family business into the man he is now, someone trying very hard to be better than his inheritance." Victor met her eyes in the rearview mirror. "Whatever you decide, know that his interest in you isn't a game. He doesn't play games with people he respects. And he respects you." The car pulled up to her building, where Rico was already standing on the sidewalk, scanning the street with the trained eye of someone who'd learned to spot threats in crowds. "Thank you, Victor," Maya said quietly. "Call if you need anything," he replied. "Anything at all. That's not Mr. Ravenna talking. That's me." Inside her apartment, Nai was asleep, the television casting flickering light across her peaceful face. Maya stood at the window and watched Rico take up position across the street, a guardian she hadn't asked for but couldn't quite bring herself to refuse. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Security will maintain distance. They won't interfere with your life unless there's a credible threat. You're safe. I'm sorry tonight ended the way it did." Maya typed and deleted 3 different responses before finally settling on, "Thank you for showing me the art. It was worth the complications." His response came immediately. "The complications are just getting started. But so are the possibilities. Sleep well, Maya Chen." She didn't sleep well. She dreamed of galleries where the paintings bled, of men in expensive suits who smiled with razor blades, of hands with calluses that could build or destroy with equal efficiency. And when she woke at 3 a.m. with her heart racing, she found herself reaching for her laptop, pulling up everything she could find about the Ravenna family police reports, news articles, business filings, the documented history of a family trying to launder its legacy through legitimate enterprise. She read until dawn, until her eyes burned and her coffee went cold, until she understood exactly what she was looking at. Not a fairy tale, not a rescue. A war that had been going on for generations, and she just walked onto the battlefield without realizing the shooting had already started. At 7 a.m., her phone rang. Dante's name on the screen. Maya stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "Tell me the truth," she said without preamble. "Am I in danger?" "Yes," he replied immediately. No hesitation, no softening. "Marcus Vitelli's people know who you are now. They'll investigate you, look for leverage, possibly approach you with offers or threats depending on what they find. And that's just the immediate concern. Should I disappear? Change my name? Run? You could." A pause. "But I'm hoping you won't." "Why?" Maya demanded, her voice cracking slightly. "Why am I worth this complication to you?" The silence stretched so long she thought he might have hung up. Then, "Because when you looked at Jasmine's painting, you saw what I see, someone fighting their way out of circumstances they were born into, refusing to let their origin story become their only story. And when you rejected me at that bar, you reminded me that not everything in this world can be bought or intimidated into compliance, that some people still choose based on principle." Another pause. "I want to be around people like that, even if it's complicated, especially if it's complicated." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the choice pressing down on her shoulders. "If I say yes to whatever this is, then I protect you," Dante interrupted. "Properly. Not just security watching from across the street. Full integration into a support system that has kept my family alive for 3 generations. You'd have resources, training, connections. And in exchange, I'm part of your world," Maya finished. Publicly, with all the assumptions and consequences that come with it. Yes, she thought, about Nai's oxygen machine, about thesis advisors who kept pushing back her defense date because she had to prioritize shifts over research, about the constant low-level panic of never having quite enough money or time or safety. She thought about Jasmine's face when she'd talked about her art, the pure joy of someone who'd been given the space to create. She thought about Dante's hands building champagne moments for strangers, about the way he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle worth solving rather than a conquest worth claiming. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Take your time." His voice carried relief that she hadn't said no outright. "But Maya, while you're thinking, stay alert. Don't go anywhere alone at night. Vary your routine. And if anyone approaches you with questions about me or my family, don't engage, just call me immediately. You're scaring me." "Good," he said bluntly. Healthy fear keeps people alive. Naive trust gets them hurt. After they hung up, Maya sat with her cooling coffee and her sleeping grandmother, and the morning light turning her shabby apartment into something almost beautiful. She had 72 hours before her next shift at Apex, before she'd have to face the knowing looks and whispered speculation, before she'd have to decide if she was the kind of person who played it safe or the kind who walked into fire because something on the other side was worth burning for. At noon, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Dante Ravenna is not a fairy tale prince. He's a wolf in expensive clothing. Ask him about the Brooklyn waterfront deal in 2019. Ask him what really happened to the contractor who tried to go to the press. Then decide if you want to be the next person who disappears into his story." A concerned observer, Maya stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then she forwarded it to Dante with a single question. "Your turn to tell me the truth. All of it." The response came 20 minutes later. "Meet me tomorrow. Noon. I'll show you everything, the good, the bad, and the parts I'm not proud of. Then you decide with full information. Address attached. Come alone or bring security. Your choice. Always your choice." Maya looked at the address, a warehouse in Red Hook, nowhere near the polished veneer of Manhattan penthouses and Metropolitan Club galas. She thought about observation versus participation, about the moment when watching became doing, when safety became cage. Then she texted back, "I'll be there. Alone. If I'm making this choice, I'm making it without a safety net. That's what I'm afraid of," Dante replied. "See you tomorrow, Maya Chen. And thank you for not running yet." Maya set down her phone and allowed herself one moment of pure terror at what she was about to do. Then she started researching the Brooklyn waterfront deal, pulling up archived news articles and police reports, arming herself with questions that demanded answers. If she was walking into the wolf's den, she'd do it with her eyes open and her survival instincts sharp. The observation phase was over. Tomorrow, she'd start choosing. The Red Hook warehouse sat at the edge of Brooklyn like a confession waiting to be heard, all rusted metal and broken windows that reflected the gray October sky. Maya arrived 15 minutes early in an Uber she'd paid for herself, refusing the clean simplicity of Dante's car and driver, needing to prove to herself more than anyone that she could still make choices independent of his influence. Rico was waiting outside, leaning against a black SUV, with the patient stillness of someone who'd spent half his life standing guard. "He's inside," Rico said, straightening as she approached. "Alone, like you asked. But Miss Chen? I'm staying out here. Not because he told me to. Because I like you. And I've seen what happens to people who walk into rooms without someone watching the door." Maya nodded, grateful despite herself. "Thank you." The warehouse interior was vast and empty, sunlight streaming through high windows to illuminate concrete floors marked with old oil stains and the ghost patterns of machinery long since removed. Dante stood in the center of the space, hands in his pockets, wearing jeans and a simple black sweater that made him look younger, more vulnerable than the tailored suit suggested. "You came," he said, and she heard the relief in his voice. "I research before I make decisions," Maya replied, stopping 10 feet away, maintaining distance. "I spent last night reading about the Brooklyn waterfront deal, about Samuel Chen, no relation, the contractor who was going to expose cost overruns and labor violations, about how he disappeared for 6 weeks, then suddenly withdrew all his complaints and left the city." "And what did the articles tell you?" Dante's voice was carefully neutral. "That your family made him an offer he couldn't refuse, that he was terrified, that justice wasn't served." Maya met his eyes. "Tell me what really happened, not the public version. The truth." Dante was quiet for a long moment, and she watched him calculate, maybe for the last time, whether to protect her with comfortable lies or respect her with ugly honesty. Samuel Chen found evidence that my uncle was skimming money from union pension funds and using undocumented workers to increase profit margins, Dante said finally. He was going to bring it to the FBI with documentation that would have destroyed not just my uncle, but the entire legitimate side of our business. Everything we'd spent a decade building. So you made him disappear, Maya said, her voice hollow. My grandfather did, Dante corrected. He had Samuel picked up, held for 3 days, showed him photos of his daughter at school, his wife at the grocery store. Made it very clear what would happen if he went to the authorities. He paused, jaw tight. I was 26. I argued against it. I lost. Samuel was paid $2 million for ladder, his silence, and relocated to Portland with a new job and a guarantee that his family would never be touched. As far as I know, he's fine. As far as you know, Maya repeated. You terrorized a man for doing the right thing. Yes. No excuses, no justifications. Just the flat acknowledgement of guilt. And your uncle? The one who was actually stealing? Removed from all business operations, his accounts frozen until he paid back every dollar with interest. He lives in Florida now, fishing and staying out of family affairs. Dante took a step closer. I took over the waterfront project personally. Brought in independent auditors. Made sure every worker was documented and fairly paid. It cost us millions more than the original budget, but it was clean. That doesn't erase what happened to Samuel Chen. No, it doesn't. Another step. Maya, I'm not asking you to absolve me or my family of past sins. I'm asking if you can see the difference between the man my grandfather was and the man I'm trying to be. Between legacy and choice. Maya's hands clenched at her sides. The text I got. The concerned observer. That was Marcus Vitelli, wasn't it? Almost certainly. Or someone working for him. Dante pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, then held it out to her. This is the full file on the waterfront deal. Everything. Police reports we managed to suppress. Payments made. Samuel Chen's current status, he's a project manager for a construction firm in Portland. By the way, his daughter just started college. His wife runs a bakery. They're safe and comfortable, which doesn't make what we did right, but it's not the worst outcome. Maya took the phone with trembling hands and scrolled through documents that painted a picture far more complex than the simplified narrative she'd found online. Yes, intimidation. Yes, covering up crimes. But also, restitution. Follow-through. A family trying, however imperfectly, to claw its way out of patterns that had been set generations before. Why are you showing me this? She asked, still reading. Because you deserve to know what you're choosing. And because, he stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. Because I'm tired of hiding. From you, specifically. Every person who's ever gotten close to me has had to live with versions and omissions and careful truths. I don't want that with you. Maya looked up from the phone. What do you want with me, Dante? Really? He closed the remaining distance between them, and she could see the faint shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the cost of the choice he was making. I want someone who sees all of me, the inheritance I can't escape, and the future I'm trying to build, and chooses to stay anyway. Not because of what I can give you, but because you believe the direction I'm moving is worth the complications of getting there. His hand lifted, hesitated, then gently touched her face. I want you, Maya Chen. Your sharp mind and your stubborn principles and your refusal to be bought or intimidated. I want morning coffee where we argue about art theory. I want someone who'll call me out when I'm making the easy choice instead of the right one. I want a partner, Maya finished softly. Not a decoration or an accessory, a real partner. Yes, the word came out rough, honest. If you'll risk it. Maya felt herself at the edge of a decision that would reshape her entire life. Behind her, the safe path thesis completion, bar shifts, slow, careful years of building security through her own effort. Ahead, chaos and danger, and the complicated reality of loving a man who came with generations of sin attached to his name. I need you to promise me something, she said. Anything. No more intimidation. No more making people disappear, even with comfortable settlements. If someone comes after your business with legitimate complaints, you face it in court like everyone else. No grandfather's methods, no shortcuts through fear. She held his gaze. I can't be with someone who terrorizes people, no matter how justified you think it is. That's my line. Something shifted in Dante's expression. Hope, maybe. or the weight of expectation finally acknowledged. "I promise," he said. "And I'll put it in writing for every business I control. New protocols, independent oversight, the works. If I break that promise, you walk away, and I don't stop you. With enough money to start fresh somewhere else," Maya added. "So I'm never trapped by financial dependence." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "Negotiating your exit before you've committed to entry. That's very practical. I learned from watching art patrons," Maya said dryly. "Always know the resale value before you buy." "Am I being purchased, Miss Chen? You're being chosen. There's a difference." Dante's hand slid from her face to the back of her neck, pulling her closer until their foreheads touched. "Then I choose you back. Complications and all." The kiss was inevitable had been since that first night at the bar when she'd rejected him, and he'd looked at her like she'd finally said something interesting. But the reality of it still caught her off guard. The gentleness of his mouth against hers, the barely restrained hunger in the way his hand tightened in her hair. The sense of falling and being caught simultaneously. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Maya laughed shakily. "This is insane. You know that, right? We barely know each other. I know you take your coffee black with 1 sugar. I know you call your grandmother every day at 7 p.m. I know you annotate art books in the margins like you're having arguments with dead painters. I know you're terrified of becoming your mother, whoever she was, and that you hide that fear behind academic achievement and careful control." Dante's thumb traced her jawline. "I've been paying attention, Maya. The question is whether you have been too." She had. God help her, she had. She knew he took his espresso in tiny cups and drank exactly 3 per day. Knew he was left-handed, but had taught himself to sign documents with his right to match his grandfather's signature style. Knew he carried reading glasses he never wore in public. Knew the scar on his jaw came from a childhood fight with his cousin over who got to control the family legacy. And he'd let his cousin win because even then, he'd understood the weight of the crown he'd eventually inherit. "This is going to be complicated," she whispered. "The best things are." He kissed her again, slower this time, and she let herself sink into it, into the choice she was making, into the future that was terrifying and impossible and somehow exactly what she wanted. They were still tangled together when Rico's voice cut through the warehouse, sharp with urgency. "Boss, we've got company." Dante pulled away instantly, his body language shifting from lover to leader in a heartbeat. "How many?" 3 cars, Vitelli's people. They're not trying to hide it." Maya's heart kicked into high gear. "What do they want?" "To make a point," Dante said grimly, already moving toward the door, pulling her with him. "Rico, get her in the SUV." "No," Maya planted her feet. "If this is about me being in your life, then I face it with you. No more protection that keeps me ignorant." Dante looked like he wanted to argue, then seemed to recognize the futility. "Stay behind me, do exactly what I say. And if I tell you to run, you run. Understood?" Before Maya could answer, the warehouse door banged open. Marcus Vitelli strode in, flanked by 4 men whose suits didn't quite hide the bulges of shoulder holsters. His expression was equal parts amusement and menace. Dante, how touching. A romantic hideaway in scenic Red Hook. His eyes slid to Maya. "Miss Chen, I'm surprised you're still associating with the Ravennas after learning about their methods. You seemed like a woman of principle." "I am," Maya said, stepping forward despite Dante's warning grip on her arm. "Which is why I'm here. Dante told me the truth about the waterfront deal. All of it. Now tell me, Mr. Vitelli, how many contractors have disappeared permanently in your operations? How many people didn't get relocated with generous settlements?" Marcus's smile thinned. "Careful, my dear. You're out of your depth." "Actually, I've been researching you too." Maya pulled out her phone, hand surprisingly steady despite her racing pulse. "You've had 7 OSHA violations in the past 3 years. 12 workers injured, 2 permanently disabled, with settlements so small they barely covered medical bills. You're currently under investigation for pension fund manipulation in New Jersey. And there's a very interesting pattern of building inspectors who suddenly retire right before they're supposed to file reports on your properties." The warehouse went very quiet. "Where did you get that information?" Marcus's voice had lost all its smoothness. "I'm an art historian. I know how to dig through archives and connect patterns in primary sources." Maya met his gaze steadily. "You wanted to warn me about Dante? Consider yourself researched. The difference between you two is that he's trying to be better than his inheritance. You're actively making yours worse. For a moment, Marcus looked like he might lunge at her. Then he laughed a harsh, ugly sound. You stupid little girl. Do you think digging up dirt protects you? It makes you a liability. Ask Dante what happens to liabilities in our world. They get offered legitimate jobs and fair compensation, Dante said coldly, moving to stand beside Maya. Or at least, that's the new model. Your model: intimidation, exploitation, violence is dying, Marcus. The city's changing. Law enforcement is changing. You can evolve or become extinct. Is that what you tell yourself? Marcus sneered. That you're better than your grandfather? You're his creation, Dante. Shaped by his methods, funded by his crimes. You don't get to wash that blood off with art foundations and pretty speeches. You're right, Dante said, and the admission seemed to catch Marcus off guard. I am his creation. I carry that legacy whether I want to or not, but I get to decide what I do with it moving forward. And I've decided to burn down the parts that need burning, even if I get scorched in the process. He pulled out his own phone, tapped something, and suddenly the warehouse's ancient speaker system crackled to life with the sound of a recorded conversation. Tell Vitelli we need to move on the Ravenna girl. Make it look like an accident. Boyfriend gone wrong, something the cops will file away without digging. Boss wants it clean. No connections back to us. It's never clean. But we'll make it quiet. The blood drained from Marcus's face. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. That was recorded 4 hours ago, Dante said quietly. Your men are discussing a plan to kill Maya and frame it as domestic violence. I've already sent copies to the FBI, the NYPD, and 3 journalists who owe me favors. You came here to threaten us, but you've actually given me everything I need to end you. That's entrapment, Marcus snarled. It won't hold up, maybe not in court, but it'll hold up in the court of public opinion. And in our world, reputation is everything. Dante's expression hardened. You threatened someone under my protection. That's not business anymore, Marcus. That's personal, and I protect what's mine. The standoff stretched taut as a wire, everyone waiting to see who would break first. Then Maya did something completely insane. She stepped forward, past Dante's protective stance, and walked directly up to Marcus Vitelli. Here's what's going to happen, she said, voice calm. Despite the adrenaline screaming through her system, you're going to leave. You're going to shut down whatever plans you had for me or Dante or anyone else in his organization. And in exchange, Dante's not going to release that recording publicly. Maya, Dante started, but she held up a hand. But, she continued, if anything happens to me, to my grandmother, to anyone I care about, if I so much as trip on a suspiciously loose sidewalk tile, that recording goes everywhere. Along with all the research I've compiled on your operations, I've set up a dead man's switch. Multiple people have copies with instructions to release if I don't check in regularly. It was a complete bluff. She'd done no such thing. But Marcus didn't know that. She watched him calculate, saw the exact moment he realized she might be just crazy enough to have actually done it. You're making a mistake, he said finally, voice tight. Probably, Maya agreed, but it's my mistake to make. Now get out of here before I change my mind and let Dante handle this his way. Marcus stared at her for another long moment, then turned sharply and stalked toward the door. His men followed, hands carefully visible, no one making any sudden moves. When the door slammed shut behind them, silence flooded the warehouse. That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen, Rico said from the doorway, something like admiration in his voice. Maya's knees went weak. Dante caught her before she could fall, holding her against his chest while her hands shook with delayed reaction. You're insane, he murmured into her hair. Brilliant and insane. Did I actually just threaten a mob boss? Maya asked, voice muffled against his sweater. You absolutely did. Dante pulled back to look at her face, and there was something in his eyes she'd never seen before, not just respect or desire, but partnership. Recognition of an equal. Please tell me you actually set up a dead man's switch and weren't just bluffing. I'll set one up tonight, Maya promised. Along with actually compiling all that research I claimed to have. Dante laughed, the sound surprised and genuine. You're going to give me a heart attack before I'm 35. Consider it motivation to stay on the right side of things. They stood there for a moment, holding each other in the dusty warehouse light, while Rico kept watch at the door, and somewhere in Brooklyn, Marcus Vitelli retreated to plan his next move. "We should go," Dante said finally. "Get you somewhere safe while I figure out how to make this stick." "Your apartment or mine?" Maya asked, then realized what she'd implied. "I mean, for safety, strategically. Mine has better security," Dante said, and there was heat in his voice that had nothing to do with warehouse threats. "And a guest room, if you want distance. Or, Maya prompted, feeling bold in the aftermath of surviving her first mob confrontation. "Or my room, if you want proximity." His hand traced the line of her spine, and she felt the promise in the touch. "Your choice, Maya Chen. Always your choice." She thought about her grandmother's apartment with its single security guard, about thesis work and bar shifts, and the life she'd carefully constructed to be safe and small and controllable. Then she thought about Jasmine's face when she talked about creating art, about dead man's switches and dead rats, and the strange exhilaration of walking into danger beside someone who saw her as a partner rather than a liability. "Proximity," she said. "But we're setting up that dead man's switch first, and calling my grandmother to tell her I'm staying with a friend. And maybe ordering pizza because threatening mob bosses makes me hungry." Dante kissed her quick and hard and full of promise. "I knew you were going to completely ruin my carefully ordered life the moment you told me to take my condescension elsewhere." "Is that a complaint?" "That's gratitude," he said, and meant it. 3 months later, Maya stood in a newly renovated gallery space in Chelsea, watching workers hang paintings for the grand opening of the Ravenna Foundation's latest project. A permanent exhibition space for emerging artists, with free admission and workshops for kids from underserved neighborhoods. Her title was officially Arts Director, though her actual job description included everything from curating shows to reviewing financial statements, to occasionally reminding Dante that fear wasn't an acceptable business strategy. The dead man's switch was real, now a network of lawyers, journalists, and trusted friends who had complete documentation of both the Ravenna family's transformation and Marcus Vitelli's ongoing criminal enterprise. Maya checked in weekly, more out of habit than genuine fear. Marcus had gone quiet after the warehouse confrontation, his attention diverted by a federal investigation that had mysteriously gained momentum right around the time certain recordings became available to certain prosecutors. Dante appeared behind her, arms sliding around her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Stop working," he murmured. "The opening isn't for 3 more hours. You're allowed to breathe." "I'm breathing." Maya leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady rhythm of his heart against her spine. "Just making sure everything's perfect." "It's already perfect. You made it perfect." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Though I have a question. Move in with me, officially. Not just staying over most nights because your apartment is inconvenient. Actual cohabitation with your name on the lease and your books taking over my shelves." Maya turned in his arms to face him. "That's not a question. That's a statement disguised as a question." "Fine, Maya Chen. Will you move in with me and continue disrupting my life in the best possible way?" She pretended to consider it, even though her heart was already saying yes. Had been saying yes for weeks now. On one condition. Name it. Nine comes too. The oxygen machine. The Cantopop videos. All of it. Your place is big enough, and I'm not leaving her alone in that apartment. Dante didn't hesitate. Already converted the garden suite. Hired a nurse for day shifts. Stocked the kitchen with her favorite tea. At Maya's shocked expression, he smiled. "I told you I pay attention. Your grandmother is part of your life, which makes her part of mine. That's how this works." Maya felt tears prick her eyes, the good kind, the overwhelmed kind. "You converted a suite for my grandmother? I also set up a scholarship fund in your mother's name, the one you never talk about but keep a photo of in your wallet. Full ride for art history students with financial need." He cupped her face gently. "I can't erase the years you struggled, Maya, but I can make sure other people don't have to struggle the same way. If you'll help me figure out how to do it right." This time when she kissed him, it was slow and deep and full of all the words she didn't have, yet gratitude and love and the tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd found something real in the most unlikely place. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. "Is that a yes to moving in?" "That's a yes to everything," Maya whispered. "The apartment, The partnership, the future, all of it. Even the complicated parts? Especially the complicated parts. Outside, the city moved in its endless circulation of ambition and opportunity, and people trying to become better versions of themselves. Inside the gallery, paintings waited to be seen, artists waited to be discovered, and two people who'd started as strangers across a bar found themselves building something neither had expected, a life that honored the past while refusing to be trapped by it. Rico appeared in the doorway, trying and failing to hide a smile. "Boss," the mayor's office called. "They want you to speak at the Arts Funding Committee next month. Tell them I'll do it if they agree to hear testimony from 5 artists the foundation supports," Dante replied without looking away from Maya, "including Jasmine. The city needs to hear directly from the people they're supposedly serving." "You're getting good at this whole legitimate businessman thing," Maya observed. "I have an excellent teacher. I'm an art historian, not a business consultant. You're both. You're everything." He kissed her again, quick and sweet. "Now go call your grandmother and tell her she's moving into a mansion. I want to hear you try to explain this relationship in Cantonese." Maya laughed and pulled out her phone, moving toward the office while Dante handled the endless logistics of opening night. As she dialed, she caught sight of her reflection in one of the gallery windows, hair swept up, professional dress, confidence in her posture that hadn't been there 6 months ago. She looked like someone who'd found her place in the world, even if that place was more complicated than she'd ever imagined. Nai answered on the second ring, her voice thin but sharp. "Little bird, tell me you're not pregnant." "I'm too old for that kind of surprise," Maya burst out laughing. "Not pregnant. But Dante wants us to move in with him. You and me. He set up a whole suite for you with a nurse and everything." Silence on the other end. Then, "This man, he's serious about you?" "Very serious. And you're serious about him? Even with his complicated family?" Maya watched Dante through the office window, arguing good-naturedly with Rico about lighting placement, his sleeves rolled up and his hair mussed from running his hands through it. A man trying every day to be better than his inheritance, choosing the hard right over the easy wrong, building a future that honored the past without being strangled by it. "Yeah, Nai. I'm serious about him. Then we move, but I'm bringing my chair and my photos. I don't care how expensive his furniture is. Deal." Maya felt warmth spread through her chest. "I love you. I know. I'm very lovable." A wheezing laugh. "And little bird? I'm proud of you. Your mother would be too." After they hung up, Maya sat for a moment with her phone in her hands, letting herself feel the full weight of the choice she'd made, the risks and rewards, the danger and possibility, the way love sometimes arrived wearing the wrong face until you looked close enough to see the truth underneath. Dante appeared in the doorway, concern flickering across his features. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Maya said, standing to meet him. "We're moving in, both of us. Nai says we're bringing her chair. We'll buy a truck," Dante said immediately. "Hell, we'll buy 10 trucks. Whatever she wants. You know you're going to spoil her, right? I'm counting on it. Someone has to tell me embarrassing stories about you as a child." Maya laughed and let him pull her close. Let herself believe in this impossible, complicated, beautiful thing they were building together. The gallery opening that night was perfect, full of artists and patrons and people who believed that beauty mattered, that supporting creativity was worth the investment, that the world could be shaped by choices made consciously rather than patterns repeated mindlessly. Maya gave a short speech about the power of art to transform lives, and when she looked at Dante in the audience, she saw him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch, not possession or pride, but partnership, recognition of an equal. After the last guests filtered out and the caterers cleaned up, and Rico finally stopped hovering, Dante took Maya's hand and led her up to the gallery roof, where the city spread out below them in a carpet of lights. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Maya's heart stuttered. "Dante, it's not what you think." "Not yet." He opened the box to reveal a key on a simple silver chain. "Key to the gallery, key to the apartment, key to everything I'm building that I want you to have access to. No doors locked between us. No secrets, no half-truths, no protected spaces." He lifted the chain, waiting for permission. "Partners in everything. If you want it." Maya turned so he could fasten the chain around her neck, feeling the weight of the key settle against her heart. Partners in everything, she agreed, turning back to face him. Though I reserve the right to call you out when you're being an idiot. I'm counting on it. He pulled her close, and they stood there on the roof while the city hummed below. Two people who'd found each other across a bar and chosen each other across a warehouse, and would keep choosing each other through whatever complications came next. I love you, Dante said the first time he'd spoken the words out loud, though his actions had been screaming them for months. I know, Maya replied, then smiled at his expression. I love you too, even though you're a former criminal with a complicated family and a tendency to solve problems with money instead of conversations. Former alleged criminal, he corrected. The charges were never proven. Keep telling yourself that. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. While the city sparkled around them, and the future opened up like a gallery full of empty walls, waiting for them to decide what kind of art they wanted to create together. When they finally pulled apart, Maya rested her head against his chest and let herself feel the full weight of contentment, imperfect, complicated, earned through hard choices and honest conversations and the daily work of building something real. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For seeing me, for choosing honesty even when it was hard, for believing I was worth the complications. Dante's arms tightened around her. Thank you for not running when you saw who I really was, for believing I could be better than my inheritance, for choosing me back. They stood there for a long time, holding each other while the city moved below them, full of other people making their own choices, writing their own stories, trying to become better versions of themselves. And somewhere in Brooklyn, in a warehouse that still smelled like oil and old machinery, the space where they'd made their first real choice together sat empty and waiting, a monument to the moment when observation became participation, when safety became courage, when two people decided that the best stories were the ones you wrote together, complications and all. Epilogue, 1 year later. The engagement announcement in the Times was small and tasteful. Dante Ravenna, founder of the Ravenna Foundation, to Maya Chen, arts director, private ceremony planned. What the announcement didn't mention was the FBI investigation that had finally concluded with no charges filed against Dante or his legitimate businesses, or the fact that Marcus Vitelli was currently serving 15 years for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder, or that Samuel Chen from Portland had sent a wedding gift, a painting his daughter had created, with a note that simply said, "Thank you for proving second chances are possible." The ceremony itself was small family and close friends only, in the gallery where they'd built something beautiful together. Nai sat in the front row with oxygen tubes and happy tears, while Rico stood as best man and Jasmine served as Maya's maid of honor. When Dante slid the ring onto Maya's finger, he whispered something only she could hear. Still sure about this? Last chance to run. Maya looked at him, this complicated, damaged, determined man who'd chosen to be better than his inheritance every single day, who'd built her a future instead of buying her a fantasy, who'd given her partnership instead of protection. I stopped running the moment I walked into that warehouse, she whispered back. Now I'm choosing. Every day, I'm choosing you. Good, Dante said, and kissed his wife, while their friends cheered, and the city hummed outside, and the future spread out before them like a canvas waiting to be filled with whatever art they decided to create together. Because the best love stories aren't the ones without complications. They're the ones where two people decide the complications are worth it, where observation becomes participation, where committing to each other honestly, completely, with full knowledge of the cost becomes the most revolutionary act of all. Maya Chen, art historian and former bartender and current wife of a reformed criminal, had finally found the masterpiece she'd been searching for all along, a life built on choice rather than circumstance, on partnership rather than rescue, on the daily work of becoming better than your inheritance together. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and in the end, that was more valuable than any fairy tale. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you love this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story. Retry.